Hello, I'm Jason Soto,
And I'm Lisa Leahy.
and we're the hosts of the mini-cast Between the Scares, a podcast that takes a look at all the films Blumhouse Productions have produced. You may not recognize the name, but Blumhouse has produced a lot of your favorite horror films, including Paranormal Activity, Insidious, The Purge.
And non-horror films like Griffin and Phoenix and The Fever.
Yes, those two, but the horror ones also include Lords of Salem, Oculus, Ouija.
Yeah, but there are also stupid ones like The Tooth Fairy and the Darwin Awards.
Alright. So Jason Blum did some non-horror films, and we'll be covering those too, for better or for worse.
Ooh, like The Gem and the Holograms live-action movie from a few years ago.
He did that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I guess. Anyway, you can find episodes of Between the Scares at rabbitholepodcasts.com or anywhere else you find your podcasts. So come follow us and we'll see you Between the Scares. This was no fruit of such worlds and suns has shine on the telescopes and photographic plates of our observatories. This was no breath from the skies, whose motions and dimensions our astronomers measure or deem too vast to measure. It was just a color out of space, a frightful messenger from unformed realms of infinity beyond all nature as we know it. From realms whose mere existence stuns the brain and numbs us with the black extra-cosmic gulfs it throws open before our frenzied eyes. Color Out of Space, 1927.
Hi, and welcome to With Strange Aeons, a podcast taking a look at visual Lovecraft adaptations and comparing them to the original story. So this can include anything visual, movies, TV shows, video games, board games, whatever, as long as there's some sort of artistic rendition of a work by H.P Lovecraft. I'm your host, Bear, and today I'll be covering 2019's Color Out of Space, and I'm joined by the producer and host of several Rabbit Hole podcasts, Jason Soto. Hi, Jason.
Hey, what's up? How you doing?
Oh, wonderful. So, you haven't read Color Out of Space, right?
No, actually, I have not. I've not read the story that this is going to be based on.
Okay, so did you go into this like knowing the plot of Color Out of Space?
I knew nothing outside of a trailer that I watched when the movie came out back in 2019, and I just knew there was a color, and it was out of space.
Wow, really? I don't know how you reached that conclusion.
I just came up with that on my own. I don't know if anyone else came to that conclusion. Maybe I'm super smart. I don't know.
You should like talk about movies professionally or something.
I should start a movie podcast.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, without getting too into it, because we'll talk more about it later, what'd you think of the movie, like just in general?
A general sense of the movie. I thought it was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I agree.
I do have problems, which we'll get into, but overall, I enjoyed it, and I would recommend it to horror fans.
Yeah, I had no problems with it, but I know nothing about movies, so it tends to be more of a, did I find this fun to watch? Yeah, okay, it was a good movie.
Okay.
So I kind of mentioned this to you, but I was really happy with like the beginning of the movie because it starts with that like opening monologue from the original short story.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you caught this too, but at the end, that end monologue he uses is also from kind of the end of Color Out of Space.
Okay. So it bookends they use the original story as the bookends in the beginning and the end, but that's about it.
Well, it matches up pretty well. The original Color Out of Space, like with a U, is how the color in that one's spelled because Howard loved the British, is told by this narrator who's getting this whole story from like a family friend or neighbor of the Gardner family that was affected. So this movie follows more of like the hydrologist Ward, but then also it follows Lavinia, who's this daughter of the family who didn't even exist in the short story. The short story, it was 3 sons.
Okay.
So it does stray a little bit, but I feel like in spirit, the kind of outside narrator still is there.
Okay. Yeah. See, I didn't know that, and I felt it was kind of natural to have a daughter and then two sons. So them changing up the gender of one of them's interesting, and then adding in the what's his name, Ward,
Yeah.
to be the narrator, was also interesting. Now the profession that he does, I don't know a lot about science, so I don't know if that's an actual
It is.
like a thing that someone does. I guess he tests the waters.
Yeah, so in the original short story, the narrator actually is showing up way after the Gardner family has already died. He shows up after the color out of space has happened and it's all over.
Oh.
So he's literally sitting in this guy's kitchen getting the story, and he's so freaked out by it, he just leaves. But he was originally there to take a survey of the land to make a dam. So then they made Ward this hydrologist who's testing the water. And like, spoilers for the end, which we'll talk about more, but you know, the movie ends with him standing on top of the dam. So
Okay.
yeah. But Lavinia, I remember
Lavinia.
you watched the movie and we were texting about it because I watched it first.
Yeah.
And you were like, that was really good. What's with her name?
Yeah, I did, because everyone else in the movie had normal names. You had Benny, you had a Jack. I already forgot what the father's name was, but Nathan, yeah, like everyone had normal like names, and then Lavinia, it's like, the fuck happened?
Well, in the short story, it's like not the case at all, because the names are all like really biblical, even for the 1920s. So like the neighbor he's getting the stories from is named like Omni, and then the one of the sons' name is like Thaddeus, and the dad's name is like Nahum. So it was interesting to me, because when, you know, that Lavinia was the only kind of strange name. When originally they were all a little bit wonky.
Okay, no, I guess that's fair. All right.
But when you said Lavinia, what's with her name? I think I started to go into like my spiel about like, oh well, actually it's a reference, and I had to stop myself so I could talk about it here.
Okay.
And have you be more surprised. But so you already know some of this, but Lavinia, I think, is a reference to Dunwich Horror, because you have Lavinia Waitley in that one. And you haven't read Dunwich either, right?
I've not read it. I won't go into them here, but I've played a card game version where you're in Dunwich. I'll just leave it at that, I guess.
That doesn't shock me that you've played a board game but not have read the book.
I do that often.
But Lavinia in that story is like super parallel to this one. Like they're, I think, supposed to kind of be the same character, because in that one she's the daughter of this wizard, and she uses the Necronomicon to summon Yog-Sothoth, who's like who Cthulhu comes from. And kind of interestingly enough, in that short story, she does this by standing in a circle of stones, which Lavinia does at the very beginning of this movie. And then, but that Dunwich Lavinia gives birth to Wilbur Whateley and the, you know, Dunwich Horror himself. So there's this kind of obvious connection, I think, to existing Lovecraft mythos, where Gardner uses the Necronomicon to kind of protect herself through it. You know, she does the whole cutting her arms and stuff ritual, which you texted me about, and you were like,
yeah. I don't do good with like cutting in the flesh stuff. I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah. No, I don't blame you. But it did kind of work, because if you think about that scene where her mom was standing over her in the attic, all the mom really did was like drool on her a bunch, you know.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point.
And she was the last, but I think that it was probably because there was a planned Dunwich Horror inspired sequel, because this was supposed to be a trilogy of movies.
Oh yeah.
I don't think we're ever going to get that, because, you know, the director was a piece of shit.
That sucks. I hate when that happens. I hate when they have a series of good ideas and then somebody has to ruin it by being a terrible, terrible human being. Well,
and then, like, I kind of mentioned this to you, and I was like, hey, I'm going to talk about Shakespeare, but you got to just roll with me on it. I promise it's relevant. But, so Dunwich Lavinia is named after, like, Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus is Lavinia, who was killed by her father. And I think it's kind of interesting that this Lavinia ended up like that. A lot of the tension in the movie was between Lavinia and Nathan. So it's like you had that father-daughter, teenage kid kind of aggression, but then there was also that extreme that was brought on by the influence of the color, because I think you can like agree with me, but Lavinia is this weird kind of anachronistic figure in the movie. Like,
Yeah, like she seemed older.
yeah,
Like,
I still don't really know what age she was supposed to be, because I kept thinking like 18, 19, but I think she was supposed to be like mid-20s.
I don't. Well, I mean, it. So there's a part where the dad, played by Nicolas Cage, by mind you, says, "Hey, we got to go do this thing that we're gonna dive into, but we're gonna go do this thing." So the son, Benny, you're in charge. Now that could be a sexism thing, I guess. Like, you're the man of the house. But I took it at first to mean like he's the oldest, because normally they always pick the oldest kid to babysit the other two kids.
Yeah.
But it could be a sexism thing where it's like, well, because you're the man, you're the older man, or old this man compared to the little boy. We're gonna put you in charge, even though you're younger. So it could be either way. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, and also too, we don't know how old Ward is, and them two had like a thing for each other.
That's why I don't think they were 18, 19, because he has like a Miskatonic University shirt on,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
if he's like an established hydrologist, I guess he could have been like a grad student out and about. But I went into this movie knowing nothing except Nick Cage is in it, so it opened to Lavinia doing this ritual, and I was like, oh, they're gonna set it like in the past, like this is gonna be like maybe not the 1920s, like earlier than that. And then out comes Ward Phillips from the woods, and he's dressed in like jeans and a t-shirt, and I was like, oh,
With a cell phone.
with a cell phone, and because they show Lavinia in this like cloak with this horse.
Yeah. In the woods, practicing like magic and doing spells and stuff. And then in walks in 21st Century Wonder Boy.
Well, and I think it's kind of cool because there's like a running theme in a lot of Lovecraft stuff. Like you see it in like Herbert West Reanimator, you see it in From Beyond, but this idea of like modernity bringing detriments. So Lavinia, I think, is in a way kind of saved by her reliance on this kind of archaic older magic.
Mm-hmm.
So like you see like the mentions of the alpacas being like the animal of the future and all the electronics short out. Then you have Lavinia, who her response isn't to go to a phone. Her response is to go to her room and use the Necronomicon of all things to protect herself.
Yeah.
But even at the end of the movie, it's kind of unclear whether she lives or dies. But I think it is fair to say, like, her departure is far kinder than the whole rest of the Gardner family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Using that as a segue, what'd you think about the death?
About
Just in general.
all
you
of
can
them?
just say a general, like, ugh.
I don't know who had the worst one.
Teresa and Jack.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I said, oh, I know what I'm in for. I've read this short story so many times. Like I'm sure there's going to be surprises, but they're probably going to. And then they had the whole Jack Teresa melding combination, and I had to pause the movie for a second and go like, what the fuck? I had to like rewind it and be like, did I just see that right? But that freaked me out when that happened.
No, I can kind of see. Yeah, I wasn't expecting it. Not at all. I didn't expect any body merging, any body horror in this at all. Honestly, I thought the worst was gonna be when the mom cut her fingers off, and I thought that was gonna be it. But then no, we get this literal like thing from like the friggin' David Cronenberg's Fly, like this thing just merges, and it's like, oh, okay, that's different. All right.
Yeah, I did kind of go into it expecting some body horror because again, I've read the short story, so you get
Okay.
a lot of them still kind of lined up like the deaths in the movie because like in the short story, Mrs. Gardner and the son Thaddeus, who I think is supposed to be Jack, just because in the short story they both go mad and they're locked in different rooms of the attic, and then Mrs. Gardner eventually, because she isn't given a name since it's Lovecraft in the 20s, so he just calls her Mrs. Gardner, but everyone else gets a first name. But she eventually like loses her ability to speak. She's crawling on all fours, and she's so mutated that like the neighbor has just mercy kills her.
Oh.
And then the son ends up just dying in the attic, and he's the first one to actually die in the whole family, and he's buried in the yard. So then you have, I think, reasonably you could say that Jack quote unquote dies first because he kind of just gets absorbed into Teresa.
Yeah, this is true.
And then the whole, crawling on all fours thing, and they made a point in the movie of her losing her ability to speak.
Yeah.
And then the second son who dies, he actually dies while getting water from the well, which, Benny didn't die by getting water. He died because he went in because he heard the dog.
Yeah.
Which I was like, I get it's because he was under the influence of the color, but the whole time he was crawling into the well, I was like, dude, leave the dog, man.
Well, even Lavinia was saying that. She's like just leave him. He's just a dog. Come on, we gotta go. So yeah.
Yeah. And then, funnily enough, and I kind of saw this as a connection to the short story again, is that the last son, no one knows fully what happened to him, and it's kind of implied that he dies in the well, but it's never really confirmed because all Nahum in the short story says is like, oh, he lives in the well now. And Lavinia, you never really get that confirmation of what on earth happens to her because she kind of just gets swept up in the cyclone and is gone. It's like, basically. Bye. And then Nahum in the short story, like right at the end, they find him all like mad and mutated, and he's just kind of losing it, and he's saying his family's still he's like, oh, they're just living in the well. But he has this moment of lucidity like right before he dies where he's like, it's the color. And then I think in the movie, you see Nathan have these kind of moments of maybe not full lucidity, but where he's like kind of gets awareness for a split second before he finally just goes over.
Yeah. The last 20 minutes really friggin' lost me.
Yeah, okay, so we'll talk about that. What did you think of the actual color, though? The color.
Oh, the actual the color in and of itself. I thought it was pretty.
Yeah, I love pink.
I can totally see why everyone kind of went crazy over it because it was actually a very nice color.
Yeah, it was a very pretty color. I thought it was a little bit fun, and I know I mentioned this to you, but magenta isn't actually a color, so I think that was a really neat way of showing it. Because magenta, there's no like magenta corresponding wavelength, like there's no magenta on the visible color spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the kind of effect of the magenta fog, and then they had that whistling noise, and I kept thinking my tinnitus was acting up, so I was like, what? But then there's also like that visual yuckiness, like the mom and son getting kind of melded together.
Yeah.
The inside of the produce that was all nasty, which happens in the short story too. And then you had the livestock scene where it cuts to the livestock and you can't even tell what you're looking at because they're just all this pile of
just mangled alpacas.
But it is really pretty, like the flowers that were growing, like the little
the trees and the flowers and stuff. Yeah, it was really nice.
And the produce looks really pretty, and it has that like nice little pink fog. It's kind of cute, but then it all just falls apart, and it almost gets like there's so much pink that it's overwhelming. Like it's like the family swimming in this Pepto-Bismol. It's like, ugh.
This movie is sponsored by Pepto-Bismol.
It'd be really funny if it was.
Special thanks to Pepto-Bismol at the end of the credits.
Can we get sponsored by Pepto-Bismol?
I will work on it.
Okay,
I will email them this episode, and then we'll see what happens.
Thank you, Mr. Producer.
You're welcome.
But there's also, the responses of the family themselves that I think was cool with the color, because in the short story, you only get these kind of glimpses that the neighbor's seeing. Because he's seeing it kind of happen slowly over a few months, but we get to see it all happen. So Nathan goes from this kind of like quiet, kind of dweeb dad, and then he gets so aggressive. Like he pulls Lavinia up the stairs, and like Teresa gets all forceful before she gets turned into the And then there's Jack, and he's talking to like the entity or color or whatever it actually is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I really liked it because, you know, you do get to see it all go down, and it's like, oh, this makes sense why this family is losing their minds.
I agree. Now, I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead. I just have a question.
Shoot.
Is Ezra in the story?
Ezra is not.
Played
I
by
think,
Tommy Chong.
so my thing, I think Ezra and Ward are a combination of like, I think Ezra is supposed to be who Ami was in the original, where he's this kind of neighbor who is seeing this from a distance.
Okay.
But in the short story, Ami wasn't affected. Like, he was affected in an emotional sense because that's traumatizing as hell. But he wasn't, you know, he didn't get mutated or morphed like Ezra did. So I think Ezra and Ward kind of take the place of Ami, because Ward is this outside observer, and yeah, he's not a neighbor, but he's the one who's witnessing this all go down. You know,
Okay.
there's no, because in the short story you're going through, you have your surveyor narrator who's talking to Ami, who was the neighbor who witnessed this going down, but in this it's just the family, and then you have Ward as the kind of stand-in for the audience who is witnessing this directly, like how Ami did. So they just cut out a middleman. But no, Ezra, Lovecraft probably wasn't the biggest fan of drug addicts, considering his thing. And not saying Ezra was, because all he did was, you know, smoke some weed. But
yeah.
I feel like Lovecraft probably would have found some sort of weird thing. He would have been like, you know who smokes weed? Immigrants.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, you get Tommy Chong, you gotta have a character that smokes weed. So
No, I think he was perfect. He was he's an addition, like, that I think worked really, really well.
Yeah, I agree.
There's no, you know, like, he wasn't in the original story in any way, but I think his addition to the movie was great.
Okay.
But getting kind of to the ending, I asked you, like, oh, what'd you think of the ending? And you were like, that was a lot.
Yes.
And I said, well, did you catch up on the time perception stuff, really? And you were like, no.
no, not really. I'm sorry. I didn't. I felt stupid because I felt like I should have, because I'm all about time travel.
No, I know. That's why I thought you really would, but it's okay.
Like, the only thing that I caught, really, and it was kind of more throughout the whole movie, was that they kept, like, losing time. Like Lavinia was, like, doing dishes or something, and then, like, she realized that she's been doing dishes for hours. But, like, to her, it was, like, seconds. But then suddenly she realized she's been doing it for hours, that she's just been standing at the sink. And then there's another scene where Benny, the boy, older or younger, that's up for debate. But
I think he's older.
He said he swore he put the alpacas away, but then they're out still wandering around the yard. Having a movie full of alpacas was just amazing, by the way. I want more horror movies to have alpacas in it.
Well, like, living near so many farms as a kid, it honestly kind of annoyed me, because all I could think was, like, man, if they lived near a road and those alpacas got out, that'd be such a pain. Because where I go to school at, and you've heard me complain about this, we get cows in the road.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not going to hit a cow, because that cow could destroy my car if it really wanted to. But you have to just sit there, and you have to, like, call the non-emergency line, or if you know the farmer, you have to call them and be like, hey, can you come get your cow out of the field? Like, so
yeah.
But so yeah, there's, like, Lavinia and Benny outright saying, like, time's weird. Benny at one point's like, we were sitting outside for 6 hours and we thought it'd just been minutes. But then
I caught all that.
Yeah, but then also Ezra, if you remember when they meet him, he had those recordings of the color, and he's like, listen, and it's just static.
Yeah.
But he says it like he'd been recording it for years.
Yeah.
So at first when he says it, I thought, like, does he know something about, because sometimes when the characters would talk about the color, they'd say it like it had been there for years and years, when it had really been like 2 days.
Yeah.
But then I was like, oh, I think this is part of this kind of time distortion, like, and I think that's why the ending feels so chaotic, because you have, like, when Nathan's saying his family's all right in the living room with him, we know they used to be, And what I think is happening is the colors kind of changing his perception. So he's still thinking that his family's all right there with him because he's seeing like past, present, and future, because this entity isn't from our world. And kind of a theme in a lot of Lovecraftian works is this idea that entities not of our world don't experience time and they don't experience matter in the same way that we do. Like Yogg-Sothoth, for example, probably doesn't experience time in the same way as humans. He sees all past, present, future at the same time. So I think the color is in a similar vein where it's everything always happening at once. So when he says, you know, when he goes up to the attic where Teresa is right when she's about to eat Lavinia and he kills her and she says, like, she's not herself anymore. I read it less of like a she's not who she used to be thing and more of a this isn't my wife because my wife is downstairs kind of deal.
Right.
And then you also have like him physically aging. You know, he gets that rash all up and down his arms and he looks old and decrepit. And I think part of that, they kind of hint at this idea that he's scared to be like his dad. And that this aggression is like a similar thing to his dad. So I think it's supposed to show that the color is distorting it so heavily that he's becoming this thing he never wanted to be. But also just you have that physical aging of himself, and you see it too with Ezra, because when Ward and the cop are like, oh man, we need to go get him out, he's mummified because he's so old in age.
Yeah, that's right. He was like really old.
Yeah, and the tape decks, like the playback, if you remember, it was like fluctuating speed, and they could actually make out the sounds of it, which I think shows how much influence the color was having, because I'm guessing it was kind of a you can't hear this unless you're under its influence type of deal.
Yeah.
But the playback, I think, one, just my personal little pet theory, like when a tape deck is old, it messes up the playback speed of stuff. But I think also if they're stuck in this kind of time loop distortion, then that playback is also matching its flow with the speed and movement of time. So, you know, like, does that all track?
No, definitely tape stock definitely does like deteriorate the older it gets, especially if it's just out in the open. So it will be all staticky and fuzzy and whatnot.
Yeah,
when you try to play it back.
It seems like this takes place over such a long period of time when we know this is just like a few days. Yeah, because it's the meteor lands, the news people come out, and there's that, you know, horribly awkward interview with him that I loved. It was great. I think Nick Cage is a great actor. I love everything he's in, just not because it's like himself, because I think a lot of stuff is marketed as like, look, we have Nick Cage, but just because he is so good.
Yeah. No, I agree. He was perfect in this role. Absolutely.
I really liked him in this, and also Willy's Wonderland, which is off topic, but he doesn't speak in that movie. I don't know if you know that. He has no...
Someone told me. I don't know if it was you, but it was mentioned somewhere. I heard about that.
And you know I love that movie, and I think he's great in it. But
Okay.
So I think, but because of that time loop, I know you told me when we were talking about it, like, why did Lavinia want to leave and then just change her mind?
Yeah, I was confused by that. Yeah.
And I think it's because that's when she kind of falls under the control of the color. Like, she's falling into the same time loop that Nathan has, because she kind of loses it after Nathan gets shot.
Yeah.
And I think maybe then she picked up the color from him. So she's in the same time loop that at the very least he was in.
Oh.
So I think in her perspective, it's less of a I'm not going to leave because I've just changed my mind. I think it was more of a I don't want to leave because my family's all alive and well right here. This is our farm. Why would I want to leave my family? Because even though she's kind of shown to be this stereotypical, almost rebellious teenager, like, she does kind of clearly care about her family. You know, she worries when her mom cuts her hand. She worries when like Jack goes missing, and she's really the one who tries to get everyone out.
Yeah.
She realizes that shit's going down. And then, you know, the last time we see her, her eyes are glowing purple, and we know that means that she's under the color's influence. And so I think that leads into the whole, I think what's the real confusing part of the climax is after she grabs Ward and he starts glowing purple for a second and it kind of goes away.
Yeah.
But this part of the movie, I don't know about what part was your favorite, but it was like my absolute favorite part. I've gone back and rewatched just this section because I think it was so well done. But where Ward is kind of sliding in between realities and trying to get away from the color. You know, they're doing the chase through the house.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because Lovecraft is so just inherently unadaptable, which is the point of the show. But I thought it was cool that before, you know, we couldn't really see what the family was seeing. Nathan would say, "Oh, I'm seeing these echoes of my family," or Jack would be talking to something. But we didn't see that as viewers. We just kind of assumed they were losing it. But then after Ward starts getting pulled into this other world by the color and he's sliding in and out of these dimensions, he's, you know, they have the playback of the family eating dinner that we heard at the beginning of the movie. And there's them talking to each other. And he's seeing like the family sitting in the living room. So you can assume that that's what, you know, Lavinia and Nathan at least were experiencing. And I thought it was cool to have at the end there Nathan chasing him down and shouting all those like speech memories at him, and it threw me off when he did the like, "Are you looking at my legs?"
Legs, yeah.
I was like, oh, that sounds way different coming out of Cage's
Nicolas
mouth.
Cage's, yeah, exactly.
And then
Exactly.
it just rips it all away and it leaves that blasted heath of white ash, and that's like it. And if I were Ward, I think I would have moved into like the ocean or an abandoned cave, or I don't know. I would have gotten out of Dodge, but then he comes back at the end of the movie. He's standing on that dam.
He's still there. Yep.
And I'm guessing you caught it, but at the end it shows that flash of the color in the sky.
Yeah,
kind of like it isn't a fully gone thing.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Yeah, but also I think that could have been part of the setup for the sequels, which really hurts because during Lavinia's hole, when she grabs Ward, she shows these flashes of the colors like homeland, for lack of a better, or like some sort of home dimension or some sort of other world, and it has that kind of traditional non-Euclidean Lovecraft architecture with the portal with the spikes kind of linking. And I think that would have been a really cool setup for maybe Dunwich and the exploration of like Yog-Sothoth or the existence of other dimensions that they could have done.
Mm-hmm.
Then the director had to be a piece of dog water. So thank you for that one.
Yep. Yeah. Good
Fuck
job.
that guy for so many reasons. But
good job, man.
So you're more of a movie person than I am, and you said you had problems. So
yeah.
what did you? I want to know your feelings on the movie as a whole.
Okay. Well, okay. So not knowing the source material, like I'm just taking this at the face value of the movie. If someone were to go into this super blindly, like not knowing what to expect, or they just watch a trailer or whatever, I think if you're into horror, I think you would be into this because there's some interesting stuff happening. It's a little bit of a slow burn, like story wise, a little bit, because it takes time for the color to kind of do its thing, because it crash lands on a meteor on the property. It's there for like a day, and then suddenly it's gone, and then next thing you know, it's like in the water supply. And it's infecting everybody that drinks the water, showers in it, uses it, or whatever. So it's kind of a slow burn. It takes a little while for any kind of terrifying thing to happen. We just get like a lot of setup. But then we do get some, payback. We do get a payout on it. Then the crazy shit starts happening. We get the whole, I think the first thing that's really kind of terrifying to me anyway was when the mom was chopping the carrots in the kitchen, and then suddenly she just chops her fingers off.
Yeah, I told you I thought that was going to be a fake out scare, and then they really cut her fingers off.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god.
Because I think that's the first like horror thing that happens.
Yeah, like explicit horror thing, not just
like like makes you go, oh shit, okay, this is a horror movie now. Like we're in horror movie territory.
Yeah.
And then you and I we bonded over a jump scare because you told me, because you watched this first, and you said there's a fucking jump scare, but I'm not gonna tell you what it is. We'll just see if we both agree. And then when it happened for me, I said, the cat? And you were like, the fucking cat! So there's this cat in the middle of the road. And, like, Nick Cage is driving back from the hospital with his wife. And then they're just, conversation. Cat!
It scared the shit out of me. It was like doing homework at the same time. And I happened to look up for a second to hear their conversation. And then it was like, oh, shit, a cat.
Like, he just jumped, like, literally just, like, jumped in the road. And it was like, oh, okay, yeah, there we go. Yeah, and then it just goes from there. Then it's just downhill from there. And then it's body horror, psychological horror. You don't know what's going on. And then then it starts getting crazy. And then we get the stereotypical Nick Cage performance. Because if you're going to hire Nicolas Cage in your movie, you better have a scene where he freaks out. And boy, oh boy, he starts off normal. He starts off calm, cool. Like you said, geeky dad, just a typical regular guy. Then he turns into Nick Cage. And it flips. It suddenly he's a Nick Cage from, like, you know, Port of Call, New Orleans, or The Wicker Man, or whatever you might know the crazy Nicolas Cage from. You get that here, like, tenfold, I think. I think this is probably his craziest performance to date, honestly, and that's saying something.
Yeah, I thought he was wonderful in this movie, but about the like time, kind of like how fast everything moves, but how slow the build is.
Yeah.
In the short story, it's a multi-month affair. Like, the meteorite falls before harvest season, and it takes a few days to completely dissipate. So something I feel like they might not have expressed the greatest, just based on what you said. Because also I went into this kind of knowing the plot. So I'm realizing, listening to you, some of the stuff wasn't made the clearest in the movie. And I just went in with this preconceived idea of, oh, I know all this about, like, the meteorite. But in the short story, meteorite lands. They call out some researchers from Miskatonic, which this Color Out of Space is actually the very first short story mention of Miskatonic University in Lovecraft's writing.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool, because that obviously sets up for a ton of stuff, including, like, Herbert West Reanimator. But so it's a multi-month thing, and the color takes a few days to complete, or color, the meteorite takes a few days to completely disappear, but they have these researchers come out, and they take these chunks, and they bring them back to the lab, and they realize that these chunks of this meteorite are shrinking. And every day they go back to take more of these chunks of meteorite, it gets smaller and smaller.
Okay.
Before it just completely vanishes. But at one point in the short story, they do break open this, like, bubble on the meteorite, and that's kind of implied to be where the color out of space, or the entity that the color is kind of representing, it's implied that that's where it was. So there is a lot of kind of slow build in the short story, but you can afford to do that since you're not watching the family, you're watching their neighbor realize shit's going down. So he starts with, like, well, at first, you know, they got really sick. You know, they all had some weird illness, and then all the crops started going bad, and they looked beautiful, but they tasted bad. And then you get to the end of the harvest season, and, you know, the family doesn't have a ton of money, and they're all sick, and no one knows what to do. And then people just slowly stopped hearing from them. And at the end, you know, it's kind of similar almost to the movie climax, where they take a whole bunch of people, not just two, it's Ami and then a bunch of, like, police officers, and they go out to go check on this family, and it's just everything's going to shit, and kind of like the end of the movie, where everything's just so chaotic.
Yeah.
But they all get out of there alive. I know in the movie they do kill off the cop by having him, you know, snatched by that tree.
Yeah. Or was it the tree itself, or was it a monster in the tree?
I couldn't really tell. I think either both. Like, okay. I think an all of the above is appropriate for this movie.
Okay, yeah, that's probably fair.
But I really liked it. I am a little bit picky with my Lovecraft adaptations. I am happy they didn't go with green. I've told you that I am so tired of green.
Oh yeah,
everything Lovecraft, because it's such a it's a very, like, Cthulhu based idea of ooh, spooky, let's make it green. It's like, oh god, the scariest color. But I really like magenta. I think I haven't watched it, but From Beyond, like the more recent From Beyond, I think also uses magenta. I saw a post in the Lovecraft subreddit a while back that said it seems like the use of like pink is becoming the vogue for
Oh, okay.
Lovecraft.
Oh,
And
okay.
as a big fan of the color pink, I am totally in support of that. And I think
Okay.
it works well
That's
for
cool.
his writing because it's not a color you see every day. It's kind of like a color out of space.
Hey,
What? I know.
clever. Very
Thank
clever.
you. You should pay me for this. I know, what a pipe dream. I mean, I want to know more of your thoughts if you have any,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
can.
So okay, I got like I said at the beginning, overall I liked the movie. It was a
Yeah.
good movie. It was well done. Everything was well done. It was well directed, it was well written, it was well acted. Everybody did a wonderful job with, with everything. I didn't think there was a bad performance in the bunch. I think yeah, Ward might have been a little but I was willing to put up with it. It wasn't
I
terrible by
almost
any
I almost
means.
think he was supposed to be a little, because I think he's definitely supposed to be us. He's supposed to be the viewer watching from the outside, going, "Holy shit!" Because
Yeah.
he has like I think the same thoughts that I did, where I was like, "Oh my god, Lavinia's kind of hot,"
Yeah.
and then oh, this family is getting fucked up.
This is weird. Yeah. Sounds
Oh,
weird.
and then he has this whole like where he goes around and says like, "Oh, the well water's bad." The
Uh-huh.
In the short story, the well water is like such a thing. Like the well is the center of it
Oh,
all.
okay.
And I don't think they really did that as much in the movie.
I got a sense of it.
Yeah, there's
Cuz
like a
like
little bit.
cuz the little boy Jack, he keeps staring at the well like
It's
for like the
freaky.
middle of the movie. He kept just staring at it saying he was talking to his friend that was inside the well.
Hmm.
And then anytime they showed any kind of like establishing shots of the farm with all the flowers and the trees and stuff, the well was like dead center.
Yeah.
And then towards the end there, when Benny is like kind of they're trying to escape, then he like freaks out and he climbs into the well because he thinks the dog fell down in there.
Yeah, and it's
And
like even if your dog did fall down there, man. Come on.
yeah, yeah, no, I mean, here's the thing. I love dogs to death. I know you do too, but I mean,
Yeah.
I love dogs, and I don't know like what I would do in that situation. Like a part of me wants to be like, okay, just leave him. He's probably gone. Let's save ourselves. But then the other half of me is like, but he's my buddy. He's my pal. I need to go save my buddy. Like I need to,
I
I
think the
would.
thing is too, the brother kept saying like Benny kept saying like, "Oh, I can see him down there." But then when it showed down the well,
There was
there's
nothing.
there's nothing down there.
Yeah, no, it
Um
was it was the color messing with his mind.
yeah, and I think maybe that does imply maybe the dog did that end up in the well and he's seeing this past image of the dog in the well.
Mm,
Um
that could be.
because in the short story actually it doesn't end with everything getting ripped to the sky. It ends with everything getting ripped into the well.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Um which is
Yeah,
part of the
yeah.
yeah, so I thought it was an interesting departure from that ending, but I didn't hate it.
Okay. Um and then it's really just the last like 10 minutes of it's a little confusing.
Hmm.
And again, from the point of view of someone who's not read the story. Like I'm going into this as a guy who just watches movies. I watch horror movies. Um but at the same time, I also watch like weird David Lynch films. So it's like I was a little bit at home here with the weird ending, um, but because it was just like suddenly, okay, Nicolas Cage's character Nathan, he flips out. His wife is now this mangled flesh that lives in the
Yeah.
attic. He's trying to feed the daughter to the mangled flesh in the attic. Mangled Flesh in the Attic sounds like a Lovecraft story on into its own. I'm surprised it's not. Um, I could write that and say it's a Lovecraft story. Anyway,
It could be part of the Lovecraftian mythos. That is a thing.
yes, exactly. Mangled Flesh in the Attic. And then like once like Ward and the cop like show up at the house, that's when everything just goes batshit insane.
Yeah.
When like Lavinia like suddenly when the cop shoots Nathan in the back and he die. Well, I'll say he dies, and then spoilers. I think we said spoilers, right?
I'm assuming if anyone's listening to this and has gotten this far, I don't think they're going to be that hurt by the spoilers now.
Fair. So yeah, so Nathan gets shot, and then this is when Lavinia flips, where she was suddenly like the whole movie. She's like, "We gotta get this farm," and she's trying to get off this farm any way she can. There's even a horse. She's going to try to ride the horse that was introduced at the beginning of the movie away out of the farm, and then the horse just goes fucking nuts and just runs. So now they're stuck in this farm, and then once Nathan gets shot, she's suddenly like, I don't want to go. Why are you trying to take me, Ward? You're taking away from my family. I don't want to be away from my family. And the Ward's like, we got to get out of here. And she's like, no, my family. I really love. And then her eyes turn into the color.
Yeah.
And then that's when, so I got like, okay, she's being now influenced by the color, but it was just such like a switch. It was just such a sudden like,
it was pretty fast. I
the
agree.
instant he died, the second he didn't even fall to the porch yet. She was like, "No, Daddy, I don't want to leave now." And it's like, "Whoa, what the fuck happened?"
Yeah, it was kind of. I was like, really. I knew she wasn't going to realistically because I know Lovecraft, and so much Lovecraft is just like cosmicism. Like nothing matters. Like you cannot survive. You can't escape in the long term. You may have your short reprieves, but you can't ever escape time in the universe. So I knew, like, she's not going to get off. Like, they're not going to let her get out of this farm.
Yeah,
but I was still so hopeful a little bit. I was like...
Yeah, because she was a
felt,
cool character. She was a cool character.
She was, and I felt like my mom, because every time she watches a movie, she's like, oh, I hope that they go live a happy little life and stuff. So a part of me was, like, turning into my mom, where I'm like, man, I hope that her and Ward get off, and then they can go, you know...
Be together,
hide in the ocean or a cave or someplace far away from here.
Yeah, no, I was rooting for them too, but yeah, you're right. Ultimately, the horror movie nerd in me was like, they're not gonna have a happy ending. Yeah. There's no way.
I really like the confusion because I'm a Lovecraft fan, and normally my complaint about adaptations is that they make too much sense. Because the whole thing in Lovecraft is sometimes you're reading it and you're like, the hell? But that's the point, because it's supposed to be this kind of thing that's so incomprehensible that you can't even... You know, Cthulhu is so incomprehensible that people just kind of approximate to a squiddish thing. So,
yeah.
And Color Out of Space in particular is one where there's such a focus on kind of like this, we don't even know what to call this. Like in the short story, they say like, I can call it a color only by approximation because it's not, it's just a...
Yeah, it's just a thing that doesn't exist, so I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, like it's not of this world to the extent of we don't have anything to explain it.
Yeah.
But I really like that really confusing ending where you kind of feel like you're losing it too. Like it's like, oh, I would have probably lost my shit too if I was this family going through this.
Yeah, no, 100%.
But I really liked it. I always say like my favorite Lovecraft adaptations are the ones that make you feel like those pictures that demonstrate what it's like to be a stroke. Or to have a stroke where you can't fully make out what the items are, but you can kind of.
Okay.
And that reminded me of that, where you're just kind of overwhelmed by all these things that are happening all at once.
Okay. And then the last thing I gotta say about the movie is, it was the cast. Like you got Nicolas Cage and then you got Tommy Chong in it, and those are two very interesting casting choices for the characters they played. And you telling me that the character Ezra, you know, doesn't exist in the story, and he's like a combination of like a couple of characters in the story is very interesting. Because his character in the movie, they play him off almost as just like this guy that just lives on their land. And they act like he's this like, you know, hermit that like nobody can talk to or that nobody can reason with. And then the instant Ward and Benny go to his house, he's like, hey man, come on in, man, here's my cat G-Spot, good luck finding the G-Spot, man. Like, and he's like the most chillest, nicest guy on the face of the planet.
And then G-Spot jump scares you like a few minutes later.
Much like most men.
And let's say, Jason, are you frequently jump scared by the G-Spot?
All the time. The time. But anyway, yeah. So those are my thoughts. I thought it was a very good movie. As a horror movie, as it stands. I think you could go into this not knowing the story.
Yeah, for sure.
And you'd be fine. Just take everything at face value. Just everything that happens is just terrifying. You get a lot of alpaca jokes, which is fun. one of my favorite lines, and I was desperately trying to see where I wrote it. I wrote it somewhere, but it was something about there's something wrong with the alpacas, and that is like the most beautiful line I've ever heard in a horror movie to date. Like you never hear that ever. So just the fact that you get to hear Nicolas Cage too say that, like,
And there
is
sure as fuck is
beautiful.
something wrong with the alpacas.
Indeed.
They're a nasty mess of organs.
So yeah, as a movie in itself, I think it's great. I highly recommend it, especially if you love horror movies. And if you're a Nick Cage fan, I think you need to check this out. This is definitely top 5 Nick Cage performance. That 100%.
And as a Lovecraft fan, and as a picky Lovecraft fan especially, I can say that this adaptation was great because it's maybe not the exact adaptation that I know a lot of Lovecraft fans look for, where they want this almost purist interpretation, like people being mad at Reanimator for not being in the 1920s, you know? But
yeah.
I think for what it is, it's like, other than Defarba, I think that this had to be probably my favorite Color Out of Space adaptation, if not a little bit more than Defarba.
Okay. I don't even
Which
know
I'm
what that
guessing
is.
it's a German black and white Color Out of Space adaptation, so I figured.
They have a movie about the color out of space and it's black and white. How the hell does that work?
It works better than you think. I'll watch it with you and I'll translate.
Oh God. Okay, sure. I'm down. I am down to watch a black and white color out in space. Absolutely.
Out in space.
Yes.
Okay. I'm.
No, me and you. We're gonna watch it in space. That's what I'm implying.
Oh, okay. Yeah, great. I don't know how we're gonna get there.
Hey, I have my
space,
ways.
but not pay your podcasters.
Yeah, exactly. I have influence, not money. All right.
Listeners, please get us a union. We beg of you. He's working us to the bone.
Or you wanted to segue to this.
So you can support the show by going to patreon.com/rabbitholepods. For as low as $3 a month, you get early access to episodes and all kinds of great bonus content. I'm a Patreon over there. I don't listen to Jason's shows, though. I do it just to support the other podcasters that Jason won't pay. Please get us a union.
I love that I host probably the most shows, but you won't listen to mine. You listen to the other, like, 3.
Yep. Please pay us. If you would like to help support him pay us, go to patreon.com/rabbitholepods. We also are sponsored by Audible. If you go to audibletrial.com/rabbitholepod, you get to try it free for 30 days. You can download any audiobook, show, podcast, whatever they have on there. And then after 30 days, you pay $14.99 a month, and you can access thousands and thousands of audiobook shows or podcasts. You can cancel anytime, and if you do, you keep anything you've downloaded, so it's literally risk-free. Go download, I don't know, for example, the H.P Lovecraft Complete Collection, which is narrated by Andrew Lehman, and he is kind of famous among Lovecraft fans for making really good Lovecraft adaptations. All that being said, With Strange Aeons is hosted by me, Bear. You can find me on Twitter and Tumblr at OEURGH or over on Instagram at DoglightCarnivoran. Jason, would you like to share your socials with the room?
Yes, I absolutely will. You can find me on Twitter at Famous Comedian. You can follow Rabbit Hole Podcasts on Twitter over at Rabbit HP. We do have a Facebook group. If you're into Facebook, you're over the age of 40, like I am. You can go to facebook.com/groups/rabbitholepods. You can go check that out. And of course, probably the best place to listen to any podcast that we do is at rabbitholepodcast.com. Especially this show right here will be found on rabbitholepodcast.com.
Yeah, so if you're into really unfunny people, make sure to go follow him on Twitter. This show is edited and produced by Jason Soto, so I hope he doesn't fire me. And it is just one of many Rabbit Hole Podcast shows. You can find episodes of this show over at Rabbit Hole Podcasts, like Jason said, Anchor, Apple Pods, Google Pods, wherever on earth we upload it, and wherever you may find your podcasts.
Copyright 2022 Rabbit Hole Podcasts, rabbitholepodcasts.com.